Hey Braden, how's it going?
You know, still trying to come up with a character for your game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of ideas, but none of them really seem to gel together all that well.
Yeah, I'm actually almost done. Because I have 20 characters made up, and the number will be the character.
I hate you so much.
It's number 18.
Of course it is. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unqualified Experts. I'm your host, Braden Gardner.
I'm your corrupt overlord, Shane.
And today we're going to talk about one of the most daunting hurdles for a player starting a new campaign. We've all had those moments where we're getting ready to dive into the world that the DM has laid out for us, and we're excited to see the story that they're planning to tell, but we have no idea what role we're going to play in that story.
It happens to even the best of us at times.
You're definitely not alone if you're someone who's found themselves struggling to figure out what sort of character they're going to build, what sort of class they want to play. So today we're going to go over some ideas to help you get started building a creative character in a campaign. Shane, go ahead and kick us off here.
Absolutely. Well, the biggest thing is don't get intimidated right off the bat. Because a lot of times some of the best characters will start with just one small piece or one small idea. So if you can get just an idea there, you can build quite a bit off of that. One of my favorites, create a character just from a quirk. When Ben ran his fantastic Werewolf the Apocalypse campaign, my character was Coley. And this was the one where, more than any other campaign, I just could not figure out in the beginning what type of character I wanted to play. It was just a very unusual mental block for me, or as they used to say, the total brain drain. So I was looking through the system, looking for any type of inspiration as you do, and this was the first system I played where you not only had the feats, but you also had flaws. And so of course, being the mischief maker and troublemaker I am, I looked through the flaws, and one jumped out at me. Haunted by ancestral ghost. I thought, oh, that sounds kind of cool. It was the first thing that really got my attention and interest, so I looked at it, read it. Okay, you're haunted by a spirit from your family. So I thought, okay, what type of spirit would I want to haunt me, or haunt my character? I thought about it, went to the English major background, and oh, a great uncle who was an English professor. So, why is he an insane spirit? Why did he go insane? He was committed because he was an English professor who started believing he was the characters from his books. It was funny. It was a quirk I enjoyed. Coming from the heavy reading background, I could play that all day long into next week. And the DM just burst out laughing, so I knew he was happy to approve that. The trigger? Country music. Because this character...
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, okay, this character's in college. He comes from kind of the background. I'll just make him like a deadhead, a hippie type. It was in England, so instead of being, for the Grateful Dead, he is an insane Oasis fan. Still holding out hope 15 years later those brothers will get back together. They won't, but... And so, from that little thing of, okay, here is a flaw that's going to be a lot of fun to play with. The DM will have something he can introduce. It'll allow me to be a very different type of character. My character is overall mechanically, Coley was really kind of jack of all trades, and he was, I'll admit it, he was definitely master of none in that campaign. From a mechanical standpoint, I was not a fighter, I was not stealthy, I was not a healer. I did a lot of things mediocrely. I would have done them well if I didn't keep canceling my exploding dice with ones. But what can you do? Nothing if you're me.
Tragically true.
But the best part of that was the stories from that character were fantastic, because each session I would just write a 1 through 8. If country music or folk music or polka, when we were in Germany, happened to come up, I would just have the DM roll a d8. Whatever number came up, I would look down, and I knew who my character thought he was, because he was possessed by an insane ghost. Everyone else had to figure it out. And let me tell you what, when I was Hunter S. Thompson from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, that went off the rails quickly, and I don't know how I made those 3 drug overdose saves. Like, if you don't have the special trait to be resistant to drugs, you are dead from overdose. I have that trait. Roll me 3 18s, and for the first time all session I did. But, it's one of those where, I wasn't looking to be the hero of that campaign. I just wanted a character who was going to be fun. I was still going to try to contribute to the team, but I was going to throw a little bit of chaos into it. And from that just little quirk, okay, look through the system. None of the feats caught my attention. There was a flaw that did catch my attention. And off of that, I spun off a character who, by the end, I was actually quite fond of and quite happy to play. Even if I spent the whole boss fight literally soaking damage for everyone else as I got punted half a mile away 3 different times. I took those hits, at least.
Huh? Yeah.
But there you go. From a mere quirk, you start with the little thing that catches your interest. You just add a little bit of details. And you would be surprised how much a session or 2 in, you just naturally end up filling out the rest.
So while Shane's, well, for lack of a better term, troublemaker.
Accurate.
Sounds like it is a super complicated concept. It was really one that came together through nailing down one specific detail and then asking a series of follow-up questions that allowed him to build out from an idea into a fully fleshed out character with quirks, with backstory, with a bunch of nuance that you wouldn't necessarily get if you tried to do this all at once. And you don't necessarily have to pin that down just off of a character quirk or a personality. There are other methods that you can use to start from different places. Shane, do you have an example of another one?
I do. Pulling on the fiction background, no one should be surprised that I like backstory.
Backstory's good.
And so, Braden, you have heard about this one secondhand because you were not in this gaming group, but let me tell you a story about Aiden.
Okay.
From a family of once powerful nobles, but after generations, it was like a passing in one age to another. They were noble blood, but new noble houses came up. His went into decline. So he is stuck with this family of history. They came from knights, they came from heroes, they came from warriors, they came from princes and kings. And right now, they were so in the past from that, so divorced from that time in the new era when this campaign's taking place, that he is basically little more than a commoner. So to me, the weight of that holds on him. Hearing those stories from when he's 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, he hears all these stories how his family is a noble house, how they fought in these ancient battles. They were part of these great stories that make up this continent's mythology. But they're not noble. They have a little bit of land, they have some coppers and silvers, they have enough, they know how to read. But for all intents and purposes, they're commoners at this point. And kind of the weight of how do you live up to this past of heroes and knights and fighters when you are looking around and you're basically another peasant in a peasant village.
That's gotta weigh on a character basically having to hear, so these were the good old days of the golden age.
And so this character becomes obsessed. He refuses to accept that this slide is inevitable. They come from noble blood. They come from a noble family. They have a coat of arms. How embarrassing would that be to have a coat of arms that nobody recognizes?
Oof.
Yeah, in this type of world. And so to him, he is driven. He's not going to settle to be head of a small town militia like his brother, the low-level fighter. His sister married a low-level merchant. She's comfortable, but they are what they are. But he is obsessed with, our family came from this. We were meant for greater things. And he is willing to pursue it, whether it's by, power comes from the sword. Power comes from knowledge, arcane knowledge. Power comes from charisma and will of force. And so that's his backstory. I thought, okay, that is this character's background. What would that make a person look like? Well, mechanically, right away, it fills in a lot of characteristics for you. You know, you might argue that very open to being a character who is going to multi-class, because he knows power can come from multiple places, so he is not stuck going one direct route, especially if he thinks that might lead to a dead end. In this case, he is obsessed with bringing back the family name. Boy, did it sound a little bit nervous or edgy to you if you would know a person like that they might go a little bit too far with his obsession? Perfect. Maybe he would meet a fey entity in the middle of the dark woods at night, which in this case he did. You know, you see a spirit who offers you some mysterious arcane power that does not come naturally and that you've never been able to get your hands on. So Warlock made perfect sense. He was a traveler. Well, you have to learn to defend yourself, but his family doesn't have the money for a nice suit of armor even, or a sword. So Monk is a fighter. If you think about Monk as a traveler, makes perfect sense. Now, right away, is Monk Warlock a great min-max synergistic 5e combination? Not even close. But I don't need a perfect character there. From the backstory here, he has a patron. He's a warlock. He had okay charisma that got a little bit better. He had okay dexterity. You know, had to work on the wisdom a bit. Would have been nice to have constitution, but there's only so many points you can put on the sheet.
Yeah.
Even with the D8 there. But story-wise, you know, you have this traveler who learned to fight with his fists. He's learned to run extra fast because sometimes you stay, you die. He has learned these lessons from the road. He's learned these martial secrets. And then he took the Warlock Pact. Now, was my character a bit underpowered at like level 10, level 12? He was, compared to other people in the party. But an interesting thing about some of these not optimal combinations, I had some very interesting things the Monk could do. I had some very interesting things the Warlock could do. And so from the creativity standpoint, if you are thinking of this character who, he is desperate to get different types of power to return the family to its glory, he is learning from this mixture, when do you use the monk attack? When do you use the extra fist? When do you just blast someone from 40 feet away? When do you call on the lady's presence to intimidate everybody who is within 20 feet of you? And so it led to this really interesting character who, he could be morally flexible, which leaves you open to a lot of potential decisions in the campaign. You are allowed to always look at things with a critical eye. He would be a good teammate because he knew he was more likely with this party to eventually reach his goals than to do it solo. But at the same time, he made no secret of the fact that he did have an overarching personal mission that he intended to accomplish. And right there, you have your whole character from a small backstory of this fallen noble family and the son who was just not willing to accept that fate, who was haunted by his father's and grandfather's own stories. I didn't instantly think Monk Warlock, but you just kept asking the questions and you formed up this character who was really, really interesting to play, to be honest. Had a lot of moments. Surprise attacking the King's Guard. It's surprising everyone so much your party stares at you and the DM is open-mouthed. By the way, perfect time to ask. That counts as a surprise attack, right? He said yes, when no one saw it coming, it counts. So, freebie. Fortunately, because I vastly overestimated how well we were set up to deal with that situation. But it led to this interesting character who, had very unique interactions depending on the party member he was talking to. And so, even though from a capability standpoint for 5e, he was probably my least capable 5th edition character by quite a long shot, because you're going to struggle to make Warlock Monk work. It was a lot of fun. You learned to be very, very tricky when you had to be, which was any time after level 10 at that point. And it was a character that was very memorable. Or as our barbarian friend said from the party, he's scary. Makes me very happy he on our side.
That makes a lot of sense. So, you've gone over a couple examples of characters that you've put together at this point. Perhaps you can help me with my character woes, and we'll talk through kind of an example of creating a character from one detail, and I'll have you ask me some questions once I give you that detail, and we'll see if we can't put this method together to help me finish getting an idea put to paper for your campaign.
Let's do it.
Alright, so after taking a look at the Player's Handbook and Volo's Guide to Monsters, I've decided I want to play a tabaxi. Shocker, I know.
I'm shocked.
That's my detail.
Alright, do you have a name for this character?
Tabaxi tend to name themselves after clans or natural phenomena, so let's go with Maelstrom.
Okay, so chaos. I can respect that. And what part of the tabaxi spoke to you?
So, for tabaxi, what really stood out for me is that they're basically catfolk. So, I want to play up all of the most humorous traits of a typical house cat in this character's personality.
Okay, so facetious. I assume you'll be pushing a bunch of books off of the table.
Absolutely. If something annoys me or is put somewhere where I don't think it should be, it's going off the table. I'm probably pretty lazy. I'm going to need to be pushed in some capacity to go adventuring. I feel that I'm entitled to all of the world's creature comforts, so I'm probably a noble, which means I'm part of a society of other catfolk. Let's call the city Cats. K-A-T-Z.
With a K, yeah. Okay. Alright, so you need a push, you're saying. Now, have you figured out a class yet, or is that still up in the air for you?
I'd say it's up in the air. Tabaxi get bonuses to dexterity and charisma, so that makes them well suited for a few different classes. I mean, they could be monks, since they have claw attacks already, though. That's a little redundant.
Plus, you're lazy, so that doesn't hit you as committing to a full lifestyle with
True.
Monastic order.
Could be a ranger. Very big believer in natural order of things. Very big believer in hunting things down. But again, that sounds like an awful lot of work, and doesn't sound like it's going to lead to others catering to me.
How do you feel about a warlock?
Yeah, that seems like a fast track to power that I don't have to do anything to earn. Okay, yeah, I'm on board.
Okay, so let me give you a pitch for the push here.
All
You were
right.
in the town of Cats. I mean, lazy. I am sure there were... Let's just build some shelves into each building so you can just leap up and nap in the middle of the day.
Ooh,
That's a
purchase.
nice detail. And let's say there's just a rift to the Feywild in the middle of the town's temple.
That makes sense, given that...
One day, something shiny flies around your head and annoys you, and then tries to get away.
Okay.
You see...
Something mischievous, probably. Something that's trying to get my attention and get me to do something.
Yeah, like a... I don't know, pseudo dragon? Tiny dragon?
Yeah,
dragon?
something that would be smaller than me and fun to chase.
Yeah.
Get the thrill of the hunt going through me.
It takes off, hunter instinct kicks in, you're willing to undo a nap for this, leads you right through into the Feywild.
Okay.
Being the mischievous little things they are, it is a trap. You meet the king of all these dragons.
We were just playing.
It turns out the ones that are this big, their king is like 60 feet big, and
We were just playing.
he sees you, and you know the look. Because it's the look you give snacks before you chase him down.
We were just playing?
You try to climb a giant tree. Oh, it's imaginary. That's unfortunate.
Ah,
Time stops, and you meet your patron. And maybe I'll keep that as a surprise for your future backstory to help tie you into the rest of the group.
okay. I'm
If
on
you
board
don't
with this
mind.
idea. Yeah, okay.
So, the one thing your patron tells you is you need to travel. You need to get out of the city. He made a deal for your safety, but being around the very angry giant father of dragons, probably not the best place to hang out when there's a big hole to his area right there.
Yeah, I mean, as distasteful as leaving my luxurious lifestyle behind is, by the same token, I have inadvertently created a bit of a scandal, and it might be best for me to distance myself from that for a while. So sure, let's buy into traveling.
Being the tabaxi is way more fun than being the mouse.
Yes.
So,
yes, it is.
Yes.
I also think that this is going to lead me to distrust mischievous creatures like pseudo-dragons, and maybe I'll even extend that to bigger dragons like copper dragons, who are known for being a bit cheeky in the name of fun.
But lizards are supposed to be small, like prey. They're not supposed to be giant, like they can eat you.
That's true, although dragons kind of are an apex predator. Although, dinosaurs should not be. I fear them and don't trust them. They are a perversion of the natural order.
Not even smart enough to talk. They were just giant lizards.
Exactly.
Too big to eat. I think we have a character. You think you can work with that?
I think I can work with that.
Alrighty. And never be afraid to ask your DM for some help back and forth. Because a detail, a race, certain situation, a background. Hey, I'd like to come from a place like this. All of that can work. Take a look at our earlier video on the Arcane Wizard build. That was a character that I literally built from, hey, I think I found the technicality in this book so a wizard can wear armor. And from that, as we go through in that video, you get all the details. How would a dwarf like this come from a society? How would the dwarves treat them? How would he be treated when this country dwarf with the mining pick shows up to the ivory towers of the Arcane Academy? Hint, it didn't go well.
And you'll find the link to that video in the description below.
And so, I think that's really cool. And just one last thing I wanted to hit on, because, like we said, from quirks, from backstories, from even just a small amount of information, all you have to do is get that little seed that interests you and keep getting more and more information on the character. And if you don't have all the answers early on, that's totally cool. One of my favorite characters to play was actually in Braden's campaign. Matthias, aka Matt, he doesn't want to be called Matthias, and that was running in the Dresden universe. Early on in the campaign, let's see, smartass anarchist who was generally very optimistic, easygoing to an annoying fault, smartass definitely to a fault, really didn't look ahead to the future whatsoever. He was okay going day by day. And, had good friends, was generally a good person, but just kind of floating around and basically had fun ticking off authority. We had Braden's campaign, and man, did he evolve. And by the end, he was still Matt. But if you compared Matt Session 12 to Matt Session 1, they were clearly two very different people. By the end of the campaign, which I believe was your all-time favorite trait change partway through with the, oh shit, I'm in love, being one of the action cards.
That was a very good one where just kind of blindside Matt with, an actual priority in life has actually emerged from all of this chaos.
And it made sense in the story, and it just led to that. I think the character's thinking this, and Braden's eyes as DM to get back at me just lit up, and it was in the story, it worked, it was great. By the end, he was still someone who wanted to see the best in the world, but he was deeply, deeply disturbed because of what he'd been through. There was a definite paranoia that made him much more cautious in nature. He was obsessed with taking care of those few people who he really, really cared about. And that meant different things for different people, but suddenly there was a much bigger anchor and priority in life for him. He wasn't just kind of floating, he was looking very directly to the future and what he wanted out of it. And by the end there, it was just, he was still kind of a smart aleck, but he showed very clear signs of maturing, changing, or at least putting forward those first steps to, okay, this has changed. what am I going to do with that? To the point where he moved out of the country by the end of the story because the area was too PTSD inducing for him after all he'd been through. And I think that's interesting, where in a good campaign, you only need the beginnings of where your character is. You're allowed to evolve and change based on what happens throughout the storyline, and a lot of times those can end up being some of your favorite moments.
Absolutely. And for Matt, who's basically a young 20-something college student, it's very identifiable as well for both yourself and the DM, as well as the other players in your party, because most of us have been there in some capacity, whether or not you've done college or not. A lot of people who've played D&D have gone through their early 20s, will admit that their early 20s were kind of a hot mess when it came to good judgment, smart decisions, planning ahead for the future.
Yeah.
And through story...
You've had your wake-up moments. You've had those, oh crap, everything changes now moments. Or you have had close friends who have had them and were affected by the aftershocks of that.
So you didn't even have to do anything outlandish to get an excellent result out of your character. You came up with an idea, you had your traits, and then you allowed the flow of the story to kind of dictate what lessons you were going to take away from it by the end.
Yeah, and these are all very viable ways to make good characters. And sometimes going with the flow just works. One of the most famous characters in all our groups, Adonis Avarici, the tiefling bard, who could cause trouble across campaigns he wasn't even in. He literally started from, wow, I rolled terribly on my stats. What's a class that can work with one stat? Charisma, bard. Cool, let's give that a shot. And it just got weirder from there. So, don't let the character creation side of things bog you down. You don't need 100 details. Working off one or two small things and just asking questions that lead to a little bit more information and a little bit more information, if you just paint it out like that, before long you will have a character who is all ready to play, has the backstory, and you are just set to go.
But now we want to hear about some of your character creation stories. What sort of ideas sparked some of the most notorious characters that your gaming group has ever known? Did you start off with a class in mind that you wanted to build, or did you just know that you had a troublemaker personality and wanted to see where the dice might fall as things went on?
Did you start out one way and then end up going radically in another? Do you actually have a process you use to build most of your characters, or do you just like slinging it out and seeing what happens? We'd love to hear the stories you have in the comments below. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe into the video. Tell us about your next character and campaign. We want to hear about all of them. And until your next campaign, good gaming.
See you next time.
If you like what you just saw, please support us by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more great gaming content.